Hello, journalism crew. We're almost done our What is News unit. Today we're going to take a look at what is news according to radio and the internet. Then we're going to take a look and review news judgment. So, pun of the day, the raise and wind about how we couldn't achieve greatness. Our purpose and learning targets are trying to identify news according to broadcasters so we can understand why different types of why different types of media report on different types of stories. So we're trying to define what news is according to radio broadcasters. We're also going to review proximity, prominence, consequence, human interest, and controversy, and take a look at elements of news judgment and compare what news is to television versus radio. So we talked last week about news according to television broadcasters. That's based upon importance, interest, controversy, the unusual, timeliness, proximity, celebrity, and things that are caught on tape. Obviously, television has a visual medium. It is a visual medium. It also has the audio, so it has both. And now we're going to take a look at radio, which only has audio. So not every story that appears on television is certainly going to appear on radio. Things that are caught on tape, things that are very unusual, will certainly hit television, especially if they have video. That drives up interest, which also drives up importance because of the greatest amount of viewers. So we're going to take a look here at we'll review the elements of news judgment. Again, these terms are just any terms for any type of media, whether it be radio, television, newspapers, magazines. So we talked about proximity. A story will make it because of how local it is. Consequence, meaning how important it is. Prominence, if there's an individual that is like a celebrity in that community, they don't have to be like a movie star, but maybe like the high school principal in the Devil's Herald, Mr. DeShong, if he did something great or whatnot, we'd want to cover it. He'd be prominent to our newspaper, maybe not so much to the Philadelphia Inquirer. Human interest, again, stories that show emotion. Conflict and controversy, anything that does that, like sports and war and elections and politics, usually makes it as a news story. And then timeliness is breaking news. So we are now going to take a look at a radio broadcast as we try to figure out, well, what is news according to radio? And we're also going to try to think about how does radio compare to television? So let's check out this broadcast.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Mass Mutual.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez from upstate New York. President Trump says swabs used to test for the coronavirus are on the way.
We've ordered a lot of them. They have a lot of them. Some of them, some of the states, they were shipped to states, and the states don't know where they are.
Governors have been complaining they can't lift stay-at-home orders until they get a better handle on the number of people who might get sick. Demonstrators like this woman in Denver say getting back to work is essential.
My brother owns a small business, and I live with him, and he has no money coming in. What are we to do?
The demonstrators being met with counter-protests.
I am just totally convinced that without further testing on a wide scale, that opening up too soon courts danger, that it's playing Russian roulette with our lives.
So far, more than 40,000 people have died from the coronavirus in the U.S. In Los Angeles,
thousands of city workers here are being forced to take what amounts to a 10% cut. L.A. Mayor Eric Garcetti said the workers must take 26 furlough days.
All of us remember the 2008 recession. Until now, it was the biggest economic blow of our lifetime. But there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is bigger, and it will hurt more.
At one point, Garcetti seemed to fight back tears. He said, "We are grieving, but we are not broken." Steve Futterman, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Police in Nova Scotia are investigating a motive in the worst mass shooting in Canadian history. A man killed at least 16 people in a 12-hour rampage across 60 miles. Royal Mounted Police Chief Superintendent Chris Leather.
The fact that this individual had a uniform and a police car at his disposal certainly speaks to it not being a random act.
The gunman died. A cruise ship that's traveled the world for 15 weeks is finally docked in Marseille, France. Correspondent Vicki Barker is at the foreign desk.
When the Magnifica left Genoa, Italy on a round-the-world cruise back in January, no one had ever heard of COVID-19. And thanks to its captain, all 1,800 passengers have remained coronavirus-free ever since. As soon as the Magnifica approached its first port with a known outbreak, Australia, on March 14th, he ordered everyone to stay on board and set a course for home. They didn't get that trip of a lifetime, but thanks to a cautious captain, they've lived to tell the tale.
98-year-old Prince Philip has just issued a rare statement. Queen Elizabeth's husband is thanking members of the medical and scientific communities for their help in the fight against COVID-19. Dow futures are down 400. This is CBS News.
Okay, so that radio broadcast was very fast-paced. That was about 2 or 3 minutes. They got you about close to, I think, about 6 or 7 stories. Obviously, there was a lot of breaking news talking about what's going on with the COVID-19 outbreak and what different cities are doing and so forth. You heard a lot of different reporters. This was CBS Radio News, which is a national radio news network, kind of like CBS Television. They're affiliated. And so they have a lot of reporters all over the world that they were able to quickly check in with. Those stories were very quick. And obviously you couldn't see anything. So at the very end, if you were watching it on television, then there would be probably a little icon telling you about the economy, telling you about the stock market. So since you can't see it, the broadcaster ends with that. And that gives you a little bit of an indication of who the audience is. You have to think about, again, who's listening to the radio. Of course, the amount of listeners to the radio has gone down significantly over the past 20 years or so with the advent of the internet and how that's taken over and so forth. But people listen to the radio, especially in their cars. So, and usually they're driving around because they're working, particularly during the day and so forth. So when you think about radio comparing to television, I want you to take a minute and think about that. Obviously, as we kind of talked about, a lot of the stories that were on radio would certainly be on television because of breaking news being so prominent. The unusual stories are more rare to be on radio. They're usually trying to stick with things that are most important of greatest consequence to their listeners. And certainly things that you can't see, they can at least try to give you natural sound, the sound bites that you were able to hear during that broadcast. And certainly what we call the man on the street interview, the interview with, basic people, average Joes, and how they're dealing with the different conflicts of the world. So you see both of that in radio and television. Obviously, television is going to go into give you a little bit more time for a broadcast. This was only a few minutes. It's not to say that there aren't radio broadcasts that do span an hour or so forth. A lot of television newscasts are simulcast on the radio, but that's not as typical. Okay, so when we think about radio, what radio is, what news is according to radio, it's about hard news, just the facts. Okay, this is not about a lot of soft news. They don't have time for that. Things are timely, certainly, and it's dependent on the audience. Okay, the audience has to listen, and so that changes things up. The audience is on the move. They're driving in their cars typically, or maybe they're at work and they're, listening to it in the background. But it also needs to be entertaining, depending upon the type of newscast, type of radio station will determine how entertaining it will be. If you're listening to a rock station in the morning, those disc jockeys will still give you some news. Usually it's more entertaining. It's more about celebrities. It's more connected to the type of music that they have. But they will give you some entertaining news of the unusual. And, they will usually play a soundbite or a clip, from something that might have aired on television and so forth. So the differences between radio and TV are minimal. But I would say there's an emphasis on radio to being timely, the timeliness, the breaking news, and mainly just keeping to hard news, where television will give you more soft news. Okay, so we're going to take a stop right there.